wonderful organizers. I really want to thank everybody who was involved in the creation of this event. This is the most, honestly, I keep saying I feel cared for. There's a real sense of family here, so I think you've got something really special going on. So thank you so much to the organizers, Asu, everyone else who's involved in this. I am having sticky mic issues, but I'm just going to go with that. Before I move on to the performance, I just want to acknowledge, as a non-Indigenous person of color, we are performing, sitting, learning, etc. on occupied Tonga land, and one that is maintained through slavery and wage slavery. I think our politics start to look very different if we start from that fundamental acknowledgement. So the show today is called Dear World, I Think We Need Some Space. So there's this weird ass flyer up there. And yeah, my friends always ask me if I make this shit in MS Paint. I do not. I do not still have MS Paint. This is fully Photoshop. I'm just a weirdo. And Kermit the Frog is on the flyer for good reason. I'll explain that later in the performance. But what this idea of Dear World, I Think We Need Some Space is all about. So as Marissa and Danny mentioned, I'm part of a duo, artivist duo called Dark Matter. My slightly taller queer South Asian friend Alok, we're vaguely interchangeable people, so it's fine, is not here. But if they were here, then the show might be a little bit more balanced. Because see, the fundamental difference between my politics and Alok's politics is that I identify as a spaceship girl, right? So what this means is my relationship to the world is like, fuck this shit, the world has been mapped over with all these geographies and histories of colonial and other violence. I'm just gonna get my crew and get a spaceship and leave. Fuck this shit. And Alok would say something like, oh, but we really need to build coalition with like male allies and like white people, and we need to educate straight people about how to, interact with our communities. I'm like, fuck that shit. I'm just gonna space. So tonight we get a thoroughly unbalanced view, and all you get is separatist girl. Y'all appreciate. So when I say Dear World, I think we need some space. I think separatism is something that has taken on like a weird, like angry, radical connotation, and I'm really happy to inhabit that connotation, right? But I think it also has something to do with our sense of care, our sense of like actual, radical progressive politics. Like, what can it look like? Separatism has been responsible for some of the hugest advancements in our social movements. Like, the term person of color was literally invented by a black women's separatist platform at a women's conference, right? Like, this shit is fundamental to the way our social movements run. For me, what does separatism look like? I have white friends, I promise. But I take more space from them, right? Like, I take more space and I say, okay, I'm gonna check out of this situation, I'm gonna go. More and more I find myself disengaging from conversations where I'm like, literally, I'm going to engage in this labor with you and try to educate you about whatever privileges it is you're manifesting right now, and it's gonna do nothing. So I'm just not gonna do it. Alok would do it, that's why we're different. But I think it's just for me sort of claiming my space so that I can work on liberatory politics that are liberatory for folks that are in my community that I've selected to work with at this moment. I know that collective liberation is not going to happen if I'm constantly a tired, exhausted, uncompassionate queer, because I feel like I'm constantly doing the labor of educating people, right? And I just want to be surrounded by more people who I feel like can challenge and push my own politics. So this show is sort of dedicated to that whole concept, right? The general arc of the show. Space is a totally intentional pun. I totally want to move into space. You could probably tell by my first poem, which is also a weird-ass poem, right? You just go into space. That's the arc of the whole show. We're going to start with White Art of Failure, right? So this is we recently got a Twitter. Me and Alok recently got a Twitter. We love it. So, how many of you have ever been to a spoken word show? Okay, good. Okay, so then you know how to interact. Thank you for setting that up. Like, when you hear something you like, you can snap. You can also moan. It's totally moan positive space. So like, okay. If you hear something you don't like, you can be like, shut up, or fuck you. You can say whatever you want. I'm not going to censor you. So if you disagree with me, I'm happy to hear it. You can also say things like, don't be nice, be nasty, go in. Things that are really kind of aggressive. You're welcome to say those too. So besides all that, I expect you to be tweeting at me if you have some sort of implement to tweet. Yeah, so our Twitter had, what is it called? handle is @darkmatterrage. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm actually gonna do it. That's so cool. Nobody ever takes up on that suggestion. Oh my god, Twitter. Sass fits really well in a Twitter account. Like, so we were on a tour in the Northeast, and we would just tweet all our sass, right? Like, in Harvard Yard, some white girl walked up to me and was like, "I like your pants," and I was like, to the white girl who said, "I like your pants, I didn't dress for you. What I meant was, I like your settler colonial gaze." So we tried to that shit. So it's just really fun. I encourage sassiness as a way of countering white supremacy, right? So the general look at the shows, we're starting with white art of failure, which again is a hashtag that we're trying to get to trend. Twitter. But really what I mean is I'm trying to convince the ways that whiteness and white supremacy is sort of constantly bred to fail. And by fail, I mean even when it's trying to advance a certain politics, right? It's always going to return to its roots of white supremacy, legacies of settler colonialism and enslavement, and the ways that those things play out. And then I want to turn the gaze a little bit and talk about the ways that whiteness is not just contained in white bodies, but also more generally just in institutions. That racism is something that I think we often consider as enacted on an interpersonal level, like you are racist to me, whatever. But it's also something that happens because institutions like this get built up, institutions like where I went to school get built up, and privilege gets concentrated in those places. Privilege, power, and capital gets concentrated in those places. And then because this show is about separatism and fucking, going into space, we're not even going to talk about white people for the last part of the show. Because I find that my life and like my scholarship and my art becomes a lot more interesting when I'm really just like not talking to or about white people. So we're going to turn away from empire and go into space. So I hope you're ready to come along with me for the journey. And yeah, and there'll be Q&A after.